Hey everyone, and welcome to your deep dive. So today we're going to tackle this question that keeps popping up. How do businesses actually innovate when the economy is, well, let's just say it's a bit of a roller coaster right now.
Yeah, definitely a question on everyone's mind.
Exactly. And, you've sent in some really interesting sources, study guides, briefing docs, even this blog post from Ligura Luggage. It's a luxury travel company over in Mallorca.
Oh, very nice.
Right. And they're all kind of grappling with this whole idea of innovation during uncertain times. And you know what the really fascinating part is? It's not about picking one strategy, like do this or do that.
Yeah.
It's about finding this balance.
Yeah, that's what really stood out to me too.
I know. So are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
Okay. So we often hear about, these two sort of opposing strategies, right? There's expansion, where businesses are like, let's invest heavily, grab market share while everyone else is panicking.
The go big or go home approach.
Exactly. And then there's retrenchment, where it's more like, okay, let's hunker down, conserve cash, weather the storm.
Batten down the hatches.
Exactly. But, these sources are suggesting that it's not that simple.
Not at all. It's way more nuanced.
Okay, so not just picking a lane and sticking with it. I mean, that makes sense. But tell me, back in 2008, during the financial crisis, did companies actually manage to innovate their way through all of that chaos?
Some did remarkably well. Some really interesting stories there. Think about companies like Amazon and Apple.
Oh, yeah.
They kept investing strategically, even when everyone else was pulling back. And you know what? When things settled, they were in a prime position, just totally ready to dominate.
Yeah, they really came out on top.
And then on the flip side, you had companies that just retreated into their shells and they really struggled to recover.
It's almost like two different worlds.
Absolute, two very different paths.
So Amazon and Apple, they saw opportunity in the middle of all that turmoil. Fascinating. Okay, let's break down this expansion strategy a bit more. If I'm a business owner right now facing a downturn, why would I even consider expanding? That just seems counterintuitive.
Right. It seems risky, but there's a logic to it. It allows you to diversify your revenue streams. So if one market segment is struggling, you've got others to soften the blow.
Okay, so spreading the risk.
Exactly. And if you're smart about it, you can capture market share while your competitors are shrinking back, positioning yourself for a stronger comeback when the economy rebounds.
Okay, that makes sense. But that's assuming you have the capital to invest during a downturn in the first place.
Right, got to have the resources.
And that the recovery will actually favor those areas you've chosen to expand into. It feels like a pretty high-stakes gamble.
It definitely has its risks, no doubt about that.
So where does retrenchment fit into all of this?
Okay, retrenchment, that's about stability, playing it safe. Streamlining operations, conserving cash, and weathering the storm with minimal damage.
Okay, so damage control.
Exactly. It's a more conservative approach, a way to survive tough times.
But wouldn't that risk sacrificing future growth? I mean, if you're not investing in new ideas or exploring new opportunities, won't you fall behind when things eventually pick up again?
Yeah, that's the trade-off, right? Retrenchment can make you leaner and more efficient, but if you over-prune, so to speak, you might not be able to jump on those opportunities when things shift.
Like missing the boat when the tide turns.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
So it sounds like there needs to be this middle ground, right? This balance between these two seemingly opposite strategies. Is that where this secret ingredient of adaptability comes in?
You got it. Adaptability, that's the key. It's about having the flexibility to adjust your approach based on the economic climate. It's always changing.
So not blindly choosing one or the other, but having the systems and the mindset in place to pivot quickly when you need to.
Exactly. You got to be ready to move.
You know what this reminds me of? Airbnb during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah. Good example.
Their core business travel obviously took a massive hit.
No one was going anywhere.
Right. But they didn't just retrench and wait for things to go back to normal. They launched those online experiences. Remember those?
Oh, yeah. They were smart about that.
Right. They used their existing technology, their host network, and they tapped into this whole new market of people stuck at home.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
Adaptability in action, right?
Absolutely. It's a perfect example of staying true to your core competencies while also being flexible enough to adapt to a rapidly changing environment.
They didn't abandon their core business.
Yeah.
They just found a way to leverage what they already had to meet these new customer needs. Brilliant.
Totally agree.
This just highlights how crucial it is to be able to quickly analyze the situation, identify opportunities, and then have the ability to pivot and adjust your approach.
Yeah, you got to be able to read the signals and react.
So how do businesses build in this adaptability? Is it about having a plan that can evolve? Or is it more about fostering a culture that embraces change?
It's both. Actually, you need a strategic framework that allows for flexibility and a team that's comfortable with experimentation and iteration, trying things out, seeing what works.
Okay, so it's not enough to just have a plan.
Yeah.
The plan has to be designed to adapt.
Exactly. And you need people who are comfortable with change, ready to embrace new
Yeah,
directions.
what about this other key theme we touched on earlier? The importance of focusing on core competencies. How does that fit into all of this?
Now, that's where things get really interesting. And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
All right, so welcome back to your deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about how businesses can not only survive these economic ups and downs, but really come out on top, you know? And we were talking about finding that balance between like going all in on expansion versus playing it safe with retrenchment, and how adaptability is really the key ingredient. But before we got too carried away with all that pivoting and adjusting, we were starting to talk about another really important piece of the puzzle, focusing on core competencies.
Right, because it's not just about being flexible for the sake of being flexible. It's about knowing what you're really good at. What makes your business stand out, what makes you valuable to customers, and making sure that stays front and center, even as things around you are changing.
So, say I'm a small business owner trying to navigate all of this. How do I even figure out what my core competencies are? I mean, is it just what I'm passionate about? Or is there like a more strategic way to think about it?
It's definitely more strategic than just going with your gut, though passion is important, don't get me wrong. But your core competencies are really about competitive advantage. They're the things you do better than anyone else, and that truly matter to your customers. They're the heart of your business, so to speak.
So it's about figuring out what makes my business unique, what makes it stand out in the marketplace.
Got it. But then how do I actually use those core competencies to stay adaptable and innovative, especially when the economy is being unpredictable? That seems tricky.
Yeah, it's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Here's how I think about it. Your core competencies are like your anchor in a storm. They give you stability. They keep you grounded when everything else is swirling around you.
Yeah.
But within those core competencies, there's still room to be creative, to adapt, to figure out new ways to express those strengths. Think about Apple for a second. What do they do really, really well? Well, they make technology that's easy to use and looks amazing.
Exactly. That's their core competency. That's their anchor.
And they haven't strayed from that. But they've also been incredibly adaptable in how they've applied that competency over time.
Right. They started with computers, then it was music players, smartphones, tablets, even watches now. They've always been innovating, but they never lose sight of that core competency, user-friendly, beautifully designed technology. That's their North Star.
That's such a good example.
Yeah.
So it's about staying true to your core strengths, but finding fresh, innovative ways to bring them to life.
Exactly. And you know what? During a downturn, focusing on those core competencies can actually free up resources to innovate. By streamlining your operations, getting rid of stuff that's not essential, you can pour your energy and resources into those areas where you really excel, where you can make the biggest splash.
So it's not about cutting back just for the sake of cutting back. It's about being strategic about those cuts so you can actually invest more in your strengths and innovate in ways that will give you an edge when things turn around.
Exactly. It's about using the downturn as an opportunity to get laser focused, to become even better at what you already do well. And remember, innovation doesn't always have to be some huge, expensive undertaking. Sometimes the most impactful innovations come from making small, consistent improvements to things you're already doing.
That reminds me of something we talked about earlier, the idea that even small-scale innovation projects during a downturn can make a big difference later on. It's like prepping for a launch.
Exactly. By keeping those innovative juices flowing, even if it's at a slower pace, you're staying ahead of the curve, trying out new ideas, developing solutions that will be ready to go when the market is ready for them.
So you're not just surviving the downturn, you're actually using it to become a stronger, more innovative, more resilient business.
That's the goal. And speaking of resilience, one of the sources you shared really emphasized that economic uncertainty, as tough as it can actually force companies to become more creative and resourceful.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Well, the idea is that when you're faced with adversity, when things are tough, you have no choice but to get creative, to find new ways to solve problems. It forces businesses to challenge the way they've always done things, rethink their strategies, and figure out new ways to create value.
It's like that saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When things get tough, We have to think outside the box and come up with new solutions.
Exactly. And those innovations that come from tough times, those can often be the breakthroughs that change the game.
Okay, so we've talked about how to figure out what your core competencies are, how to keep innovating even when things are tough, and how all this economic uncertainty can actually be a catalyst for positive change. It's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
And remember that one central theme that runs through all of this: adaptability.
Right, adaptability is key. But what does that actually look like in the real world? How can businesses actually make themselves more adaptable in a practical way?
Well, that's a question for another deep dive, maybe even a whole series of dives. But for now, let's look at some concrete examples of what adaptability looks like in action. Remember that Airbnb example we talked about earlier?
Yeah, their shift to online experiences during the pandemic was a brilliant example of adaptability.
Exactly. But their story is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. There are so many other examples of businesses that have successfully navigated these uncertain times by embracing adaptability. And that's where we'll pick up in part 3 of our deep dive.
Welcome back to your deep dive. We've been unpacking some really powerful strategies for not just surviving, but thriving in these crazy economic times.
Yeah.
We've talked about that balance, between expansion and retrenchment, zeroing in on those core competencies and making adaptability your secret weapon. But how do you actually bake that adaptability into your business?
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about it in theory, but actually putting it into practice, that can feel a little overwhelming.
Totally. It's like having all the ingredients for an amazing meal, but not knowing how to put it all together.
Exactly. So what are the key ingredients, so to speak, for creating a business that can really roll with the punches?
I like that analogy. Okay, so what are those ingredients?
Well, one of the most important ones is fostering a culture of curiosity and continuous learning within your team.
So encouraging people to be lifelong learners.
Yeah, exactly. If your team is always looking for new information, challenging those old assumptions, experimenting with new approaches, you're already way ahead of the game.
So creating an environment where people feel like they can learn and grow and even make mistakes, without being penalized for it.
Absolutely. Mistakes are going to happen. It's inevitable. But in an adaptable culture, those mistakes are seen as opportunities to learn, not something to be afraid of.
I love that. It's about shifting the mindset from fear of failure to, celebrating experimentation and learning. Okay, so curiosity and learning are key. What else?
Data, that's another big one in today's world. We're swimming in data. The challenge is making sense of it all and using it to make smarter decisions.
Right, that makes sense. But where do you even start? What kind of data should businesses be paying attention to?
Well, it depends on the business, of course, but there are some basic metrics that are pretty universal, things like customer acquisition cost, website, traffic conversion rates, employee engagement, stuff like that.
Okay, so those core numbers.
Exactly. By tracking those metrics and looking at the trends, you get a much clearer picture of what's working, what's not, and where you need to adjust.
So it's not just about collecting data to have a bunch of numbers. It's about using that data to tell a story, to uncover insights that can actually guide your strategy.
Exactly. Data can help you spot opportunities, get ahead of challenges, and make smarter decisions, especially when things are unpredictable.
Okay, data makes sense, but what about feedback? How does that fit into adaptability?
Feedback is crucial. It's like having a compass that helps you stay on course. And it's not just about getting feedback from your customers, though that's obviously important. It's also about having open communication within your team where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas, concerns, even criticisms.
So it's like this feedback loop, right? Both internally and externally, that helps you constantly learn and improve.
Exactly. The more feedback you gather, the more adaptable you become.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got curiosity, data, and feedback. Anything else we need to add to this adaptability recipe?
Well, no adaptable business can really function without agile teams and processes.
So breaking down those silos, empowering teams to make decisions faster, and streamlining those operations so you can be more flexible.
You gotta.
That makes sense. But what does that actually look like in practice? How can businesses make their teams more agile?
One way is to adopt those agile methodologies, like Scrum or Kanban.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
Yeah, they give you a structured way to manage projects, break things down into smaller chunks, and prioritize based on what's most important and what's most urgent.
So it's a more collaborative way of working, right? And as opposed to that old top-down approach.
Exactly. Agile is all about frequent feedback, continuous improvement, and delivering value quickly.
Okay, and what about streamlining processes? How do you make them more adaptable?
That can be a bit trickier because it really depends on the specific business. But the general idea is to find those bottlenecks, the things that slow you down, and then eliminate unnecessary steps. Give teams the power to make decisions without having to go through a million layers of approval.
So removing roadblocks and giving teams more autonomy to adapt to changes.
Exactly. The more agile your teams and processes are, the better equipped you'll be to handle whatever the economy throws at you.
Okay, so we've got curiosity, data feedback, agile teams and processes. Anything else we're missing from this adaptability mix?
There's one more ingredient that's often overlooked: strong relationships.
Relationships. How do those play into adaptability?
Well, in times of uncertainty, having strong relationships with your customers, your suppliers, your partners, even your competitors can be a lifesaver.
Oh, that's interesting.
They give you a support network, a source of information, a sounding board for new ideas.
So it's about building a community, a network of people you can trust, even when things are tough.
Exactly. Strong relationships build trust, collaboration, and a sense of shared purpose, and those things are so important when you're navigating challenging times.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So how do you build those kinds of strong relationships?
It starts with a shift in mindset, from competition to collaboration. Instead of seeing others as rivals, see them as potential partners. Share information, share resources, share ideas, build genuine connections based on mutual respect and trust.
So creating a win-win where everyone benefits.
Exactly. And those relationships, they'll pay off in the long run, especially when you're facing those economic headwinds.
Wow, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. We've explored the challenges and the opportunities that come with economic uncertainty, and we've uncovered some really powerful strategies for not just surviving, but thriving.
And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's always more to learn, more to explore, and more ways to adapt and innovate.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with?
Economic uncertainty is a fact of life. It's not going away. But it doesn't have to be a threat. By embracing adaptability, focusing on your core strengths, and building those strong relationships, you can actually turn uncertainty into an opportunity for growth, innovation, and resilience.
That's a powerful message. And on that note, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay adaptable, and keep innovating.